Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam,
And I'm Marcia.
and we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it.
Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we are discussing Grave of the Fireflies, which came out in 1988. It is a Japanese animated war film. It was written and directed by Isao Takahata and produced by Studio Ghibli, or Ghibli, if you will. It's based on a 1967 semi-autobiographical short story, which is also called Grave of the Fireflies by Akiyuki Nosaka, and it's set in the city of Kobe, Japan, and it tells the story of two siblings called Seita and Setsuko, and their struggle to survive during the final months of World War II in Japan. You best grab some tissues because it's really, really sad. And it was supposedly written as an apology to his younger adoptive sister called Kaiko, who died of malnutrition in similar circumstances. You can watch this movie, if you dare to, on Netflix. What did you think of this movie?
It's beautifully animated. I saw someone on Reddit refer to it as the best movie they'll never watch again. It's a really heartbreaking story. I feel like it depicts this relationship between siblings with this kind of like simplicity and realness. And there's moments where it's full of childhood whimsy. There's moments where it's absolutely heartbreaking. And I got this sense from it that reminded me of Never Let Me Go, which is also by a Japanese author, where it's just this pervasive hopelessness because you know that the ending can't end well. And yeah, that's kind of the feeling I got from this movie. It's a really beautiful movie. It's a really sad movie. What did you think of it?
I knew going in that it was going to be sad because I'd read just a little bit about it beforehand. It's got that Japanese magic that I think Western movies never have. In that sense, it's like you said, it's a little bit magical, but it's also very brutally honest in a way you wouldn't expect an animated movie to be. I don't think this is a children's movie at all. Like, the way the Japanese use animation to tell difficult stories is something I don't think we do very much in the West. And it's got a little bit of ghost story going on as well, which I always enjoy, but there is no light. Well, there is light in this movie, but it's not very helpful by the end of the movie. And I never thought I would enjoy an animated movie about World War II as much as I did this one, even though I don't think I'll be watching it again just because it breaks my heart. But it also gave me a chance to learn a little bit more about Japan, and especially about the civilians in Japan, which I feel are almost more harshly judged in this movie than the Americans are who are attacking their city. It's not meant to be an anti-war movie, but for not an anti-war movie, it's pretty anti-war.
Yeah, I wasn't able to read the short story. I had a quick cursory look for it. I could only find it available in Japanese. But I gather from just hearing other people talk about it or reading other people talking about it, this movie even adds more light into the story than there was in real life. I mean, if possible, real life was even grimmer than this movie depicts it as being. So yeah, I just thought it was a super interesting choice. I agree, for an animated feature.
For people wanting to read the story in English, you're gonna have to wait until September because Penguin is releasing it in September. So we can read it then, hopefully. Let's get into the plot.
The movie starts with a quote. The main character says, September 21st, 1945, that was the night I died. And we're introduced to a young man named Seita, played by Tsutomu Tatsumi. He's starving to death in a train station, and we are kind of getting the end of the story here. And then we're going to circle back and find out a little more about how he got into this situation. But we hear him mutter one word, his sister's name, Setsuko. She's played by Ayano Shiraishi. And a station worker discovers a candy tin that Seita's been carrying around. The station worker throws it away because it doesn't seem to be valuable in any way. And it spills open on the ground, revealing Setsuko's ashes. And in this sort of magical realism moment, her spirit emerges from it.
Yeah, at this point you're kind of like, oh, that's kind of cute. but then also you just watched someone literally just starve. I do wonder though, did you watch it in Japanese or did you watch it in the English version on Netflix?
Oh, I watched it in Japanese with subtitles.
I watched it in English because I was watching it at night in bed, and I was like, if I watch it in Japanese, I'm not going to be able to follow it because I'll fall asleep. So I've listened to the English version. So I wonder if our pronunciations are also going to be based a little bit on the Japanese versus American version of it. But the only thing that kind of disrupted the viewing experience for me in the very beginning is that the movie's almost devoid of music. Like, there's not a whole lot of music. So you hear sound effects quite a bit, but there's not a lot of music. And at the beginning, that kind of took me out of it, but you get used to it fairly quickly. And these scenes of them as spirits, because they end up being spirits together, they look very magical. They're like orangey and like you're watching a fairy tale almost.
Yeah, and we get introduced to the thematic fireflies from the title in this as well. They're flying all over the place. There are these like little glimmers of light all around them.
Which is why I thought initially it might be slightly hopeful, but again, there's no hope in this. Anyway, we flash back to the American bombing of Kobe toward the end of World War II, and the siblings' mother, played by or voiced by Yoshiko Shinohara, is separated from them as they try to make their way to a bomb shelter. The siblings evade the bombing, but they lose their home, and their home is not the only one to be lost.
Seita in voiceover mentions the black rain after an air raid, and black rain is, I don't know if it's a popular theme in post-war Japanese media, but I did see a few different references to it when I was doing a bit of background research into this. So, due to intense fires generated by the bombing, massive amounts of ash released into the atmosphere would seed the clouds, resulting in a tar-like, quote-unquote, black rain that would fall after the explosions. And this effect is best known for occurring after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, during which the black rain also contained radioactive fallout and could cause radioactive burns. So,
just to give you a little bit of background about the bombing on Kobe, Kobe was bombed a number of times by the Americans, but the first air raid on Kobe was on February 4th of 1945, and in the US, there's a training ground called the Japanese Village, which is set on the Darkway Proving Grounds in Utah. And Curtis LeMay, you may remember us talking about him before, of the USA Air Force, ordered B-29 Superfortress bombers to drop incendiary bombs to burn Japan's mostly wood and paper houses in an experimental carpet bombing against Kobe. So the first raid was just practice, which is, pretty rough. And actually, the training ground, it's called the Japanese Village because they literally built an entire Japanese village on it. And they kept rebuilding and rebuilding to see how they could do the most damage to these structures. Which I think is a horrible thing to think about, if you want to think about it.
Yeah. Always when you hear about the technical advancements and research driven by warfare is always just like so grim. Because the sort of methods that they were using when they were dropping bombs on Japan, when they really ramped up their bombing in 1945, these methods were actually originally developed by the Germans during the Blitz. So basically what they would do is they would drop a combination of high explosive bombs and incendiaries, and they would drop the explosives, which were intended to destroy roofs and walls, and that would open homes and buildings up to their sort of vulnerable, very flammable interior. And then they would drop the incendiaries and they would fall into these open roofs and through open walls. And then that would cause whole streets to go up in flames.
So after Curtis LeMay ordered the little testing raid, they bombed Kobe again on March 16 and 17 of 1945, and this time 331 B-29 bombers launched a firebombing attack against the city of Kobe again. 8,841 people were confirmed to have been killed in the resulting firestorms. If you're wondering what a firestorm is, it's when the fire gets so bad that it becomes its own ecosystem with winds and stuff, and that'll keep the fire burning for a long, long time. And these firestorms destroyed 3 square miles of city, about a fifth of its entire urban area. More than 650,000 people's homes were destroyed, and the homes of another 1,000,000 people were damaged, so that's a big bombing raid. And then on June 5th of the same year, Kobe was bombed again, and this time there were 530 bombers and they destroyed 3.8 square miles. So that's almost 10 square kilometers of the city, and 51% of what they were rebuilding was destroyed again. So they literally had no chance.
Yeah, we really can't underestimate the destructive power of these bombing raids. More people died during the firebombing of Tokyo that spring than during the immediate aftermath of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah, we also saw firebombing raids on the city of Dresden. As you might recall, if you've read The Slaughterhouse 5, I think is set in Dresden. And it's, I think, one of the most destructive ways of warfare. We've not really seen a movie about firebombing, thankfully. I don't really want to see another movie about firebombing, if I'm very honest. But the movie does something that I find really interesting, which is the fact that the Americans are almost anonymous in this. You see the planes, you see a little bit of the bombing, but you mostly see the results of it. You don't really see a lot of actual warfare going on, but you do see the fallout.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty effective in the sense that the person who wrote the short story upon which this movie is based, he was 14 in 1945, I believe. And so his impression of the war and the ending of the war is really like a child becoming a teenager. And so his impression of it would be very narrowed to his own survival and his sister's survival and less focused on, sort of the broader factors at play.
Yeah. When they reach the emergency gathering point, which is set up at the school, Seita learns that his mother has been critically injured. He goes to see her, and she's wrapped in all kinds of bandages, and you can't really see anything of her body except for her closed eyes. But she dies, and when she does, Seita keeps it from his sister, so he doesn't tell her. He wants to spare her the grief of having lost their home and their mother.
Yeah, and this idea of letting her be innocent a little while longer, although as we'll see, that's largely ends up being outside of his control.
I wonder how old Seita and Setsuko are meant to be.
Well, I think in real life, Seita, quote unquote, was 14 and his sister was 16 months old. She was less than 2 years old, I think.
Right. Too young.
Yeah, for sure. So the siblings go to live with their distant relative. They call her Auntie. She's voiced by Akemi Yamaguchi. They write letters to their father, a naval officer, but he never replies. So he's completely out of the picture. They don't know what's happened to him. But, Seita has this hope in his heart that his father's going to come back and sort of make everything all right again.
Spoiler, he doesn't.
Yeah, nothing good happens at the end.
No. The relationship they have with their aunt as they stay with her deteriorates from being kind of pleasant to being really unpleasant. She accuses them of doing nothing to help with the war effort, but then she is only too willing to eat all their provisions that they are providing. So they're staying there, but they're not really welcome. So even though they're being treated as though they're bad guys by their aunt, they do try and engage in some very cute childhood whimsy in the middle of a very terrible situation.
Yeah, I think that at this point, so much of the Japanese population is almost sort of immunized against this death and suffering and everything. They're seeing so much of it around them that the aunties took them in because she feels some sense of family obligation, but really she doesn't really want them around. No one is really looking out for them or willing to help them out. And everyone around them is just almost too shell-shocked to really perceive their suffering as anything special or something that should be helped.
Yeah. I've found it really sad how they're just wandering around trying to play while nobody pays them any mind. Like, they're pretty much being ignored by just about everybody. It's one of those cliches again where I'm gonna say it's hard to watch. Just makes me really sad to see that children can be so abandoned.
So Seika finds a warm, dry cave that seems like a refuge from their aunt's household. And you almost get the impression of like, when you're a kid and you think maybe you'll run away. And the first few hours seem easy because you have your snacks and you're hiding out in a treehouse or something, and you're like, oh, I can do this. It's me against the world. And then sort of night comes and reality sets in, and then you go home to your family. Except in this case, they don't have a family to go home to. So I think Seika is sort of living in this world where he's like, all right, we're going to go hang out in this cave and everything's going to be fine. And, obviously that doesn't happen. So the two children move out, they go and live in the cave. And at first they're able to feed themselves using money that their mother has left them, as well as rice that they acquired by trading her kimonos. And again, they're having some moments of childhood whimsy, and that almost makes it harder.
To me, the scenes at the cave feel like the most Japanese. To me, in the sense that it's like your typical anime imagery where it's all cute and beautiful and you're like, yay, and they're happy and everybody's joyful. And then you are quickly reminded that it's not as joyful. As Saita the next morning finds his sister digging a grave for the Fireflies, hence the title, which is a bit of a mass grave imagery there. And it's revealed that her aunt also had told her that her mother was dead, so Saita had been trying to keep it from her, but she knew all along. And she seems this really wise kid already. Like, she's supposed to be a kid, and yet she's handling the death of her mother pretty calmly.
It's one of those things where she has been through way too much for a child her age, to the point where she's sort of accepted it, but she doesn't really understand it.
Yeah, she would be too young even to understand. The Fireflies just made me so sad because you realize that's where the title comes from. And it's also almost a little bit like the death of innocence in that moment when the Fireflies die. It's like, all right, I guess it just went from sort of hopeful to never mind that hope.
Yeah, exactly. They get there and there's all these beautiful fireflies flying around, and they're kids, so they're quite excited by this. And then, it can't last.
Nope, nothing lasts in this.
So as time goes on, Seita is forced to begin stealing food to survive. They are having a tough time. His sister's not doing well. He takes Setsuko to a doctor who diagnoses her with malnutrition. She has this really bad rash all over her body that he thinks is from the heat, but it's not getting better. And the doctor's like, no, she's super vitamin deficient, dude. Like, this is what happens when you live in a cave and you only eat rice.
Yeah, and then he just lets them go just like that. Like, it's no big deal. He's probably seen this before. That's the sense that you get. I feel like in the West, we're at least kind of used to, I don't know what it was like at the time, even in the West, but at least if you go to a hospital, you'll be given some sanctuary or you'll be sort of safe. But they're just sent back out onto the street. It doesn't bode well for Setsuko, for sure.
There just simply aren't the resources to look after them. And it would have been like that probably in a lot of places at the end of the war. There's just a lot of the infrastructure is gone. People just, they're out of sympathy for strangers because so much terrible shit has happened to them and their families,
Yeah, the imagery of Kobe after it's been bombed at the very beginning of the movie is pretty terrifying to look at. It's very desolate and there's like nothing left. And Saita is like, oh look, that's the building where we used to eat rice soup or whatever he says. And it's still very innocent. And you're like, oh boy. He's not gonna.
Just the destruction is complete. You look at the city and you're like, wow, they should probably just go somewhere else and try again. You just can't imagine that scale of destruction and how they're going to come back from that. Everything that is gone.
I also think we don't really understand, or at least here in the West, I don't think we have it quite like that, where the houses were literally almost made of paper. Everything in a Japanese house was flammable. There's no chance. There's no putting it out. Saito learns that Japan has surrendered and extrapolates from that his father must be dead because he's not replied to any of his letters. And he's not returned, so he must be dead. He takes the remainder of what they have left from their family savings out of the bank and uses it to buy food. And it's not a whole lot, but it feels really hopeful again in the moment. It's like, I'm going to buy food and I'm going to make food for Setsuko. But
yeah, and there's really this sort of young person's mentality of like, he takes the rest of the money out of the bank and it's sort of his big last push for survival. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to buy a bunch of food and we're going to have a meal. And I don't know what the plan is after that, but that's the only thing I know to do now that my last hope of my father coming back and fixing everything has gone away.
Also, throughout this entire movie, the tin of candies, Setsuko has been slowly eating the little sour candies from it. And before he goes to buy her food, she's been eating the little buttons that are in it. And he's like, no, you can't eat those. They're buttons. So she really is starving, which kind of becomes evident when he returns to the cave to make her food. And he's brought her this watermelon that she kind of sucks on for a second. But it's too late for her and she dies of starvation in the cave. And it's the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. Because Saita then has to cremate her. And as we've seen from the very beginning, he gathers her ashes into the little candy tin. No child should ever have to do that.
Yeah. And then we return to the post-war scene that we were at in the beginning. And this time, Saita has passed away, and we see Setsuko's spirit sort of curling up next to him as they overlook the city.
And it's the modern day Kobe, I think, we're looking at with them, as if they've been there the entire time as ghosts. It's quite beautiful, the ending of that, even though it's really sad.
Yeah, definitely one of those movies where nothing really happens, quote unquote. It's really just sort of a powerful emotional journey that you go on with these two characters.
Yeah. And the cremation scene, I think nobody should ever have to watch that, to be very honest with you. It's beautiful, but also you shouldn't have to watch it.
Yeah. When I was reading about the details of the short story, after I had watched the movie, the author was talking about how there were times when they would get food and instead of giving it to his sister, he would eat it because he was so hungry. And, you know, when she would cry, sometimes he would lose his patience and he would hit her. And so he obviously felt hugely guilty for what happened to her because, of course, his real life sister did also starve to death in similar circumstances. It's so awful because this is like a 14-year-old kid. If you put anyone in a high stress situation like that, they're going to probably not do a great job of taking care of other people if they can't even take care of themselves. And so you understand why he feels this guilt, and the story is awful. But at the same time, you're like, how many people would do better in that scenario? It's this incredible pressure to put on somebody.
It is like putting the oxygen mask on in a plane. You have to put it on yourself first before you can do it to someone else. But
Yeah.
Jesus, if your sister is that small and she can't really help herself, what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I had read somewhere that when they made this into a movie, the sort of thought behind it was, as you said at the beginning, it's not really meant to be an anti-war film like it is, incidentally, but really the author meant it to be a story about people, and particularly in the 1980s in Japan, I think there was this sense from the post-war generation that these people who hadn't been through the war, who didn't have those memories in 1945, were sort of young and spoiled. And, you know, they didn't understand the suffering that other people had been through. And so he wrote these two child characters who do go into this situation very naive and innocent and spoiled in some ways. And they have no idea how to survive without the help of their parents, etc.
Yeah, it does make me wonder if this man, this author of this story, who has a similar experience, if he blames the Japanese people for what happened to him and his sister. Because in the movie, you get the sense that the Japanese people are the biggest disappointment in this. Because it starts with him dying and being abandoned in this train station, and these janitors or cleaners, whatever they are, kind of speaking of them with such little respect as they lie dying. The first one says, and there's another one over here, he's also dying, as if it's nothing. And it probably was like that because so many children were dying, and even non-children, what do you call them? Adults were dying. But yeah, it's not a short movie. It feels like it because we've only been talking for about 30 minutes about this. It's not a short movie, so even though not a lot happens, you still have to kind of hang in there quite a bit because it's just a really sad watch, guys.
Yeah. For sure. And even in the moments of lightheartedness and whimsy, you feel that pervasive hopelessness. You know what's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked into this movie a little bit because I was curious. It seems like it's kind of part of almost a genre of movies in Japan, or a genre of media, I suppose. People writing about their wartime experiences in the decades afterwards. This movie is apparently shown on television in Japan around August 15th, which is the day that the Japanese celebrate as End of the War Day, and which is known in the West as BJ Day, Victory over Japan. And the genre is kind of interesting because, of course, like every country that was involved in World War II, the Japanese do have a collective memory of it. And there's this sort of sense, I think, that regular soldiers were deceived by the wealthy and powerful. And so there was, the institution of the emperor. There were these old laws in place where people felt like they had to obey the emperor. They were almost like tricked into engaging in this war that was unwinnable. And there is kind of a sense of Japan as victims. And there have been in recent years, I would say, a bit more broadening of the popular knowledge about the atrocities that were committed by the Japanese army in the years leading up to and during World War II. But I do think that a lot of the popular memory is really centered around 1945, because for the Japanese, really, they sort of started expanding imperialistically towards the end of the 19th century. And then there weren't really battles fought on Japanese soil until right at the end of the war. And so for a lot of Japanese people, it was like, we're winning, we're doing great, everything is fine. The war is not impacting us directly very much. And then all of a sudden in 1945, you have these massive incendiary bombings. You have the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You have the massive surrender, the soldiers coming home or not coming home, as the case may be. And so a lot of Japanese people, 1945 looms larger in their imagination than the rest of the years of the war. And so there is this sense of Japanese victimhood. And there's also, I think, this really big sense of this anti-war feeling of pacifism, of we don't want to go there again kind of thing. There's this quote that I borrowed from asianstudies.org where they say, numerous post-war authors, filmmakers, TV producers, and educators have sought to preserve the painful memories of 1945 as a means of teaching younger generations the precious value of peace and to quell any resurgence of militarism.
That's interesting. I do wonder, though, because there were so many civilian casualties. Can you feel anything other than a victim as a collective? I mean, I guess if you were in the Japanese army, it would be different, but also so many civilians died.
Yeah. Well, and I think in the past 30 or 40 years, I was reading about how there have been choices made about Japanese school books, for example, where countries like China and Korea have lodged formal complaints, basically saying that, have you guys forgotten the rape of Nanjing? Like, have you forgotten that you force drafted people in Korea, that you made Korean women into comfort women, that all of this sort of colonial shit was happening in the years leading up to and during World War II? So I think there is this real sense from a lot of the countries that did directly interact with Japan during World War II that they don't take accountability for a lot of the things that their army did. And instead,
hey guys, look in the mirror. Right?
Yeah, their own experience as civilians, as victims in 1945 sort of supersedes the memory of all the other stuff. And so, I mean, it's just super interesting to read about.
Definitely. And I didn't know a whole lot about Japan. Like, we've had some Pacific stuff going on, but it's always in relation to the Americans in this case. So it's quite interesting to read about and to watch a movie about Japan as a country during World War II, because obviously not a lot happens in Japan itself. So definitely interesting and also surprisingly refreshing to see it animated. I just didn't think I would like it very much, but I did. Is this time for us to rate it, you think?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
How many dead fireflies out of 10 would you like to rate it?
Man, I would rate this movie probably, it's tough because I don't want to watch it again. And it was so sad, but it was a really well-made movie. So I think I'm going to rate it 8.5 dead fireflies out of 10. It's really gorgeous to watch. It's this very tight lens on, sort of gets you learn more about these two characters than anything else. And it's this like tight lens on their lives. And then what's happening in World War II is sort of the backdrop. And really what's most important is the arc of these characters. And I always do like to have, a character-driven drama. And in this case, I thought the sibling relationship was really well articulated. Some of the dialogue was really lovely. It's a great movie, but it's a huge bummer, is I guess what I'll leave it with. But it was kind of an interesting jumping off point to exploring the post-war collective memory of the Japanese.
Well, you've pretty much said everything I wanted to say. And so I'm going to rate it 8 dead fireflies out of 10, I think. I also thought it was just a beautiful story. I don't think it's meant to be a movie that you watch over and over. I think it's kind of a one and done kind of movie to watch. But it made me change my mind about anime, which I'm not really a fan of usually. I don't really like Japanese animation very much. But if it's used in this way, I find it very effective. And I thought it might make it less emotional, but it definitely almost makes it more emotional to see it animated like this. So it gets a lot of those points just for like form and style and story. But like you said, please don't make me watch it again because I will cry.
I think I read online somewhere that it has gained such popularity, particularly in Japan, but of course, Studio Ghibli is famous around the world for making really high quality animated films. But I think I'd read somewhere that it's been adapted a couple of times and they even did a live action, I think.
Oh no.
And I'm like,
no.
I'm good.
You shared an image of a Japanese child carrying his dead sister or dead sibling on his back, waiting for the sibling to be cremated. And just that image is making me beg not to turn it into some sick Hollywood movie ever. Like, please don't, Hollywood, please leave it alone. It's not for you. Let the Japanese handle it. I do think the Japanese handled this with quite a lot of respect in that sense. I don't want to see this live action. It would just be sensationalism that we don't need.
I know. It's especially so long after the war when it's not necessarily part of the actual living public memory anymore. You do run the risk sometimes of it becoming like torture porn kind of thing. Like you said, a bit sensationalized. Like, I don't really need to see people running from the fire and jumping into water that they don't realize is boiling. Like, I don't really need all the, if you do read Slaughterhouse-Five, the author Kurt Vonnegut, he was a POW at Dresden during the firebombing. And though it's a novel, he talks about some of the things that he saw. And it's just like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to see a live version of that.
No, thanks. No, I agree. I think everybody should maybe watch this film just once and respect it for what it is and then leave it alone.
Yeah.
Are you reading anything new?
I just started this book called Unmask Alice, LSD, Satanic Panic, and the Imposter Behind the World's Most Notorious Diaries by Rick Emerson. And there was a book that was pretty famous, or at least it was like in the 90s and early 2000s when I probably read it. It was called Go Ask Alice. And it was supposedly a memoir written by a teenager who had been addicted to drugs and all kinds of terrible shit happened to her. And then apparently it turns out that it was basically just a cautionary tale written by some Mormon. Like, it's not really a memoir at all. And so I'm really excited to read this book and find out more details about it.
So when you say LSD, is that LSD as in the letters LSD?
Yeah.
Right.
LSD as in the drug acid.
All right. That sounds interesting and different once again. How do you do it, Sam? I can't. I'm not reading anything, by the way, but I am watching loads of movies and doing lots of research that is pretty interesting. We've got some fun movies coming up, and I guess I'll be reading Tony Rushmore's biography of Red Sea Kings soon, because we might have a guest soon.
Yes, that's up on my docket as well. I'm really looking forward to it.
You've got a physical copy of that, don't you? I'm jealous.
You know, I got it from SAS Rogue Heroes correspondent George.
Oh, I'm not jealous at all. Like, at all. But I'm kidding. Of course I'm jealous. I'm always jealous of books. Anyway, thank you everybody for listening. You can find us wherever you find your podcasts. You can rate us 5 stars. We would very much like it. You can also comment on this episode, actually. Nobody ever does this, but you can, and you can tell us what we should watch next. You can send this episode to your friend who would like to be depressed for at least one evening. You can follow us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast, and you can visit our website, rosiethereviewer.com. See you next week.
Bye.